The waitress fainted in the millionaire's lap, and when he found out the reason, he became angry. The fluorescent lights of Romano's steakhouse hummed their familiar tune as Emma wiped down the last booth, her reflection ghosting across the rain-streaked window. 25 years old, and she'd been doing this for 3 years now. Same tables, same tired smile, same ache in her feet that never quite went away. But tonight felt different. Her head swam with a dizziness she'd been ignoring for weeks, and her hands trembled as she folded cloth napkins in two. Perfect triangles. In the corner booth sat a man who'd been coming in every Thursday for a month now. Expensive suit, kind eyes, always generous with his tips. She'd served him countless steaks, but tonight, when she approached his table, the room tilted sideways. The last thing she remembered was the horrified look on his face as her knees gave way. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Emma's mornings always started the same way. A cup of instant coffee in her cramped studio apartment, standing by the window watching the city wake up. She'd moved here from a small town in Ohio 3 years ago with dreams bigger than her savings account. The diner job was supposed to be temporary, just until her graphic design portfolio caught someone's attention. But rent didn't wait for dreams, and neither did her mother's medical bills back home. The regulars at Romano's knew her by name. There was Mrs. Chen, who always ordered the soup and left butterscotch candies with her tip. Tommy, the construction worker who called her sunshine even on her worst days. And then there was Himp, the man in the corner booth. Mr. Hartley, the reservation book called him. Robert Hartley. She had looked him up once, curiosity getting the better of her during a slow Tuesday. Real estate mogul, philanthropist. The kind of wealthy that made her yearly salary look like pocket change. But he never acted like it mattered. He said please and thank you, asked about her day, left tips that sometimes made her tear up in the break room. Lately, though, Emma hadn't been feeling right. The dizziness started a few weeks back, gentle at first, like the world was spinning just a little too fast. She'd skip lunch to save money, dinner to sometimes, telling herself it was just stress. The mirror showed her growing thinner, but she'd smile at her reflection and pretend everything was fine. She had to be fine. Her mother needed those checks every month. Thursday evening arrived with autumn rain drumming against the restaurant windows. Emma tied her apron with fingers that felt numb and cold. Her manager, Gloria, had given her a concerned look earlier. "You feeling okay, honey?" "You look pale, just tired," Emma had lied, forcing brightness into her voice. When Mr. Hartley walked in at 7:30, his usual time, she grabbed her notepad and headed to his booth. He smiled at her, that warm, genuine smile that made her feel seen, not just like another server in a black apron. She opened her mouth to take his order, but the words wouldn't come. The room swayed like a ship in a storm. She reached for the table's edge, missed, and felt herself falling forward into darkness. Emma woke to the smell of leather and expensive cologne. Her cheek was pressed against something soft, a suit jacket, she realized. Strong arms held her steady, and a voice, urgent and worried, was calling her name. "Emma! Emma, can you hear me?" She blinked, confused, and found herself staring up at Robert Hartley's face. Concern etched deep lines around his eyes. She was sitting on the floor of the restaurant, half collapsed against him, his arm supporting her back. Other diners had gathered around, their faces a blur of worry. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, trying to push herself up. Her arms felt like they were made of water. "I'm so sorry. I don't know what—" "Don't apologize," he said firmly, his voice gentle but commanding. "Gloria is calling an ambulance." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. Panic flooded through her foggy thoughts. "No, please. I can't afford. I don't have insurance that covers." Robert's expression shifted, something flickering across his face that she couldn't quite read. "When did you last eat?" he asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them. Emma looked away, shame burning hot in her chest. "This morning?" she lied. "Emma." His voice was soft, but it cut through her defenses like a knife. The truth. Her eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for weeks. "Tuesday," she whispered. "I had toast on Tuesday morning." Silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush her. She could feel Robert's body go rigid, his jaw tightening. Around them, the restaurant had gone quiet, everyone watching, everyone listening. Gloria stood nearby with a glass of orange juice, tears streaming down her face. "You've been serving people food for 3 days," Robert said slowly, his voice controlled, but trembling with something she couldn't identify, "and you haven't eaten anything." Emma closed her eyes. "My mother's dialysis is expensive. The insurance doesn't cover everything, and rent was due. And I just thought I could make it work. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up." Robert stood abruptly, carefully helping her into a chair first. He pulled out his phone, his movements sharp and deliberate. When he spoke, his voice was no longer gentle, it was edged with an anger that made everyone step back. "Get me the owner of this restaurant now?" Watched through a haze as Robert paced the restaurant floor, his phone pressed to his ear. Gloria brought her the orange juice and a plate of bread, sitting beside her and holding her hand. "Honey, why didn't you tell me?" She whispered. "We could have helped." But Emma knew the truth that Gloria, in her kindness, couldn't quite see. Everyone was struggling. Everyone had their own mountains to climb. She couldn't ask for charity when people were barely keeping their own heads. Above water, Robert ended his call and returned to their table, his face still tight with barely contained fury. But when he knelt beside her chair, his voice softened. "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Can you do that?" Emma nodded, too tired to do anything else. "How long has this been going on?" Not just the not eating all of it. The struggling, the choosing between yourself and your mother. The question cracked something open inside her. "Since I moved here," she admitted, her voice breaking, "I thought I could make it work. I thought if I just worked hard enough, saved enough, it would all balance out. But it never does. Every month I'm choosing food or rent, food or mom's medicine, food or keeping the lights on." Robert's hand covered hers, warm and steady. "And you chose everyone else, wouldn't you?" she asked, meeting his eyes. "If it was your mother?" Something in his expression shifted then, softened into understanding that felt bone deep. "My mother died when I was 12, he said quietly. "Cancer. We couldn't afford the treatments that might have saved her. I watched my father work 3 jobs, watched him sacrifice everything, and it still wasn't enough." He paused, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "So yes, Emma, I would choose the same way you did. But that doesn't mean you should have had to make that choice at all. Have you ever faced something like this? Share your story in the comments." The restaurant owner arrived then, a portly man named Vincent, who Emma had met only twice. Robert stood to face him, and Emma watched as this gentle man she'd served countless meals transformed into something else entirely, someone used to power. To getting what he demanded, "Your employee nearly died in your restaurant because she couldn't afford to eat," Robert said, his voice cold and precise. "We're going to talk about how that changes tonight." What Emma didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Robert Hartley had been exactly where she was once. He'd been the kid wearing shoes held together with duct tape, the teenager who stole food from convenience stores to feed his younger sister. He'd built his empire from nothing, and he'd made a promise to himself when he had the power to change things. He would, that night, in Romano's steakhouse. He kept that promise. Vincent stammered explanations about wages and industry standards, but Robert cut through it all with surgical precision. By the time the conversation ended, Romano's had a new policy. Every employee would get 1 free meal per shift. The starting wage increased by $3 an hour, and Emma would have her mother's medical bills handled through a foundation Robert had established years ago for exactly this purpose. "I don't want charity," Emma said when Robert explained it to her, her pride still clinging by its fingernails. "It's not charity," he replied gently. "It's a grant from a foundation that helps families with medical debt. You qualified the moment you filled out the application I just submitted on your phone." He showed her the screen, the forms already completed with information Gloria had quietly provided. Emma stared at the approval letter on his phone, at the words that promised her mother would get the care she needed. The numbers blurred as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" Robert pulled over a chair and sat facing her, his expensive suit creased now, his perfectly styled hair falling across his forehead. Because someone should have done it for my mother, he said simply. Because you shouldn't have to choose between your own life and hers. Because you've served me with kindness and dignity every week. And you deserve to receive the same in return. The anger Emma had seen in him earlier wasn't rage at her. It was fury at a system that forced good people into impossible choices. It was the anger of someone who remembered what it felt like to be powerless and had vowed to use his power differently. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Gloria brought Emma a proper meal, then a steak. Medium rare, with all the sides she'd served 1,000 times but rarely tasted. As she took her first bite in days, Robert smiled. Now, he said, let's talk about your graphic design portfolio. 3 months later, Emma stood in the morning light of her new apartment, still modest, but with a real bedroom and windows that actually opened. On her desk sat a laptop Robert had helped her choose, the screen glowing with her latest design project. She still worked at Romano's, but only 3 days a week now. The rest of her time went to the freelance clients she'd started building, connections Robert had introduced her to, opportunities she'd earned with her talent. Her mother's dialysis was covered. Fully, the foundation handled everything. And the relief in her mother's voice during their weekly calls made Emma's heart feel like it might burst. But the most surprising change wasn't financial. It was the friendship that had grown between her and Robert. He still came to Romano's every Thursday, still sat in his corner booth. But now, Emma would slide into the seat across from him during her break, and they'd talk about art, about dreams, about the weight of hard choices and the lightness of hope. You were angry that night, she said one Thursday, remembering. Really angry, Robert nodded, setting down his coffee cup. I was angry at myself, he admitted. I'd been coming here for weeks, tipping well, thinking that was enough. But I never asked if you were okay. I never looked deeper than the smile you wore. He met her eyes. I should have seen it sooner. You couldn't have known, Emma said softly. But I could have asked, he replied. That's what I learned from you, Emma. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit we need help. And sometimes the kindest thing we can do is offer it before we're asked. On her way home that evening, Emma stopped by the window where she used to stand each morning. Back when the world felt impossibly heavy. She could still see that version of herself, tired, scared, choosing everyone else's needs above her own. But she wasn't that girl anymore. She'd learned that accepting help wasn't weakness. That community meant carrying each other. That sometimes a collapse led to the support you didn't know you needed. The city lights sparkled in the gathering dusk, and Emma smiled at her reflection. She was still a waitress, still a daughter, still a designer chasing dreams. But now she was also someone who understood that survival wasn't meant to be a solitary fight, and that the right kind of anger, the kind that demands better for others, could change everything. If you enjoyed this story, please share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more. Thank you for spending your time with us today.